Undoubtedly, housing ranks amongst three basic human needs. The other two are food and clothing. Housing deficit is a global phenomenon and it is not in any way peculiar to Nigeria. The performance of the housing sector is one of the parameters by which the health of a nation is measured. In most developed countries, the housing sector is seen as important for stimulating economic growth. It is recognized by government that the majority of the people who are in demand for housing are the low-income earners. Hence, government's approach to addressing of the problem centers on the fundamental issues of availability and affordability. The National Housing Program was set up to provide adequate and affordable housing via home ownership and rental schemes for all Nigerians in the urban and rural areas. Now let's take a look at the scheme with a big question on our lips as to, could this be the much-awaited solution to the prevailing housing deficit in Nigeria? Well, joining me in the studio to answer these and many more questions is Ojo Kayode Olajide. He is a realtor at JOK Excellent Homes and Properties, and he would be giving us more enlightenment as regards this issue this morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It's a pleasure to be on the show today.
Yeah, good to have you, and happy new month to you.
I wish you the same.
Now, looking at the housing deficit, according to statistics, the deficit stands at 17 to 20 million housing units currently, and of course that will still grow, especially looking at the population of Nigeria as of 2020 was put at 206 million, and now we're seeing that, of course, this would keep increasing with time. But stakeholders have called for the federal government to partner with private owners, especially when it comes to housing, saying that the federal government cannot handle or provide all the housing that Nigerians need. What's your thought on that?
Of course, we in the housing sector, the federal government can't actually provide the expected housing that the Nigerian people need, because considering the fact that the deficiency is so high, looking at the ratio that you have just mentioned, about 17 million to 20 million deficit of housing in Nigeria here. And so the federal government is expected to do what they need to do to bring in private sector that will be able to provide more of this housing to Nigerians who are craving for it. At every opportunity they have, Nigerians are willing to at least get something to call a cover over their head.
Now, looking at some of the thoughts or some of the thoughts that have come into this issue, Chief Executive Officer, Matrix Court, that's Mr. Tambaya Suleiman, also said in November 2021 that Nigeria will experience 22 million housing deficit. As of now, it's about 17 to 20, but he is saying that by in the next 10 years, Nigeria will be experiencing 22 million housing deficit in the next 9 to 10 years if nothing is done to address this issue. What are the chances of reducing this number?
It depends on the seriousness and the intentionality of the government in making sure that this deficit is reduced, because as you have pointed out, by the year 2030 we will be having about 20 to 22 million deficit, which one of the factors can be as a result of urbanization, higher level of urbanization, where people move in and then they want to just come to the major city in Nigeria. And so we expect that a lot of things can be done by the government, by creating the necessary policies that will change, that will make a lot of people to come into it. And then we need to also, there's a way to reduce it also. It's about changing the mindset of Nigerians. You don't have to wait until you have the millions, the enough total millions for you to buy a property. You can actually buy more, like buy a flat, buy a room that will make you to have access that if you
But the question is affordability. There's the issue of affordability, especially when it comes to buying houses, and that's why Nigerians go for the cheaper option of renting. And now we see that even the renting is not being regulated. You'd recall that recently the National Assembly puts out a bill saying that people would be landlords who defaulted the annual payment of rent would be prosecuted, that for 1 million naira fine,
yeah,
or 3 months in jail. But of course, they are saying that the landlord must not collect more than 3 months rent. But we know that the current system is annual. You have to pay annually. You pay the agent. Then some of them would even ask for 2 years rent.
Yeah.
And you're wondering, how do we bridge this gap? And the federal government or the National Assembly bringing out this new bill, which has passed the second reading, of course, you'd wonder what are the options they have provided. Yes, there's the new housing scheme, which the federal government is now working on. But how feasible? Is this enough, or would this solve the housing deficit, especially when it comes to affordability?
Thank you very much. The affordability is the major part of it in acquiring a property for yourself. And it's important that Nigerians also need to be aware that there are mortgage policies that you cannot leverage on, where you have access to, especially if you are in an organization where you have a cooperative that can help you get access to all those mortgage availability, where you'll be able to pay instrumentally and as at a very low interest rate. So many of these developers are coming out with these kind of innovations, where you'll be able to have access to housing, to apartment, to building, whichever one you feel that your strength can take. So it helps them to be able to spread the money they have, the payment, to spread it and then be able to acquire it while they are still staying in the property. You understand? So why they are staying, it's just more like you get an apartment and then you are paying it in form of rent. It just looks like as if you are paying in form of rent, maybe monthly, maybe annually, depending on the agreement you have with either the government or the private sector that will be into it. So while you are doing that in a period of time, some of the private sector now are even going to a level where they spread it for 10 years, where you'll be able to pay easily for 10 years. And so with that, I think with the partnership with the government housing scheme that is ongoing now, the government is trying to provide 300,000 housing scheme across Nigeria, which they are making it affordable, like they have said.
34, they say it would be available in 34 states and the FCT.
Yes.
What are the states or the 2 states that are left out? And one would wonder why 34? Why not all through the federation?
Because you look at the population of all the states in Nigeria, and you look at the way the rate at which they generate revenue, the growth towards the growth of Nigeria, and you want to say, okay, let us focus on this particular state where we'll be able to make people have shelter on their head, and they'll be able to, it will be affordable to them. They feel that this level of states that they have mentioned are people that we feel, okay, yeah, they can at least be able to meet up with the payment if it's been spread. For instance, they said a 1-bedroom flat for that for the housing scheme we go for 2 million naira, and the 2 million naira will have to be spread for them to make the payment. So it depends on the individual, the amount of money you earn as salary, and then the agreement you have with the federal government. So I think that's what the government is looking at, and that's why they now stream it to the number of states they've mentioned.
But if you look at the regulation of housing rent, do you think it would work? Because you did not, okay, I'm coming from a landlord's perspective now. The landlord will tell you, I acquired this land myself, I built it with my money.
Of course.
And so the onus lies on me to determine how much I want to get for rent. And so the federal government should not call the shots. That's what landlords will tell you, because I've interacted with a few of them, and that's their thoughts. They're wondering, okay, what right does the federal government have to regulate or to tell them how to get money for their property?
It's going to be an easy thing, especially in our country where landlords are used to yearly rent. Some landlords are even going to the level of collecting 2 years rent. Imagine you have a property that you want to give out on lease. How do you expect you to be relating with your tenants or your potential tenants and payment of paying monthly? And then there's an issue that can occur as a result of maybe loss of job or loss of source of income of that particular tenant for a period of 3 months. Then what do you expect the landlord, if that landlord is actually relying on the rent, the income that is coming from the rent, as something they used to take care of himself and his family? So you don't expect him to now begin to wait for 3 months before this particular tenant sorts himself out or herself out. So this is a situation that the government can actually bridge. What can they do in this essence? Okay, if you are trying to make the landlord accept a monthly rent, why not have a particular policy or funding that will be on a reservoir for the housing, so that if there's a case of someone who has a legitimate source of income, and we know that because of this and because of that, that's why he lost his job, and we feel okay, this particular time frame should be able to get another job, and then that period the government should be able to cover in for the landlord. So if the government can give the landlords an assurance of this, then I don't think there's any reason why the landlord will not be able to go for the monthly rental issue.
But if you also look at the fact that the federal government has not really provided that option, that really affordable option for Nigerians, so that even when this landlord insists they are collecting the annual rent or the 2-year rent, Nigerians can have options and say, well, I can go for the federal government, the one the federal government has provided. For instance, look at this housing program we just talked about, 2 million naira and so on and so forth. Do you still think that is affordable enough for the average Nigerian, looking at the purchasing power of the average Nigerian?
That's a very good question, because you now look at it. Who are the government targeting to get this housing? So if you are looking at the average Nigerians, how easy will the average Nigerian be able to get access to this property for them to even say they want to buy? That's the first thing, which in most cases, many of
put out some steps, the registration and all that.
We know many of, except.
Do you think there will be some form of bureaucracy?
That's
or
what I'm
politics
saying. That's a major problem in our housing, in the government provision of what's it called, housing to the people. People who are supposed to get access to this housing are not having the access to the housing, and that's why you see bureaucracy coming up in every area. And for instance, government talking about 300,000 housing units for Nigerians. How many of average Nigerians who are actually registered for this thing online, we even get feedback? Because it's not about the registration. They can just put you just down through the processes, and then nothing is done.
But the 300,000 housing units, do you think it's enough to stand as backup or to stand as enough competition for the private owners to say that, okay, we have enough options for Nigerians if the private owners do not comply? Of
course, it's not enough, because when you are looking at the ratio, we have a deficit of 17 million, and the government is saying it's coming out with 300,000. You know, it's not going to be enough, but at least it's going to sort a lot of things. If these people that really needs these houses, they get access to it, and which is the most important thing of all. You don't tell us on the media that 300,000 is available for Nigerians, and average Nigerians, just about 50 of them can get access to it. And many of these are politicians, and everybody who has the money can pay at once. They just buy and then they resell, which is what we are experiencing in many of these housing estates in Nigeria today.
So the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Gbajabiamila, last year said that the deficit, of course, we mentioned that earlier, is about 17 to 20 million. But he's also saying that the number is increasing annually, and that the cost of overcoming the deficit is about 6 trillion naira. Of course, some huge figures there. But we've seen the country's anti-graft agencies, the ICPC, the EFCC, arrest people and recover houses from these people. Can't these houses and the monies and everything that have been recovered be channeled into this, this area of housing deficit, instead of us now churning out figures or saying that, okay, we want to embark on another? Yes, we would need to build or provide new houses, yes. But what about the ones we hear of, a minister, recovering, or rather the anti-graft agencies recovering like 7 houses from just one person? Where are these houses?
It's a big question. That, unfortunately, I'm not working for any of these government agencies that you just mentioned. But I think the best approach that the government can actually apply to all of these things is that they're supposed to create a special intervention, a fund that will be specially made for housing. I don't
Where
think we
would
have.
the funds come from?
The Nigerian government has money where they can channel, just the way we have a special fund intervention for education, where they have this particular amount of money, and then the ministries in charge of education, we have to allocate each of these funds to several higher institutions in Nigeria. The same thing Nigeria should be planning towards housing. Now, for instance, you seize a property of about, we mentioned some trillion naira that the House of Rep
6 trillion
Speaker said now, and then there are seizure of a lot of properties that's even worth more than that. And then what do you do to these properties? Are you going to now say, okay, I want to resell, and where will the money now go to? So if the government, like I mentioned earlier, the government has to be intentional about solving housing deficit in Nigeria before any issue can be done. So if they are intentional, they will be able to create a reservoir, just like I mentioned, the fund intervention, where Nigerians, the government can get access to this fund at any time for them to create more housing for Nigeria.